Good afternoon. I'm Cindy Griffin with Homeopathy Center of Houston, and we are going to have a discussion today about tantrums and meltdowns in autism primarily, but not necessarily only applicable to autism, because a lot of kids may display some of these same symptoms. So we're going to give you some ideas about some of the behaviors that we see and what they mean are going on with the kids physiologically. And so we're going to jump right into it. First of all, we are still trying to answer questions that come from our newsletter. We've asked people to send in questions, and I certainly will answer some questions in a little while. And let me just move things so that we can, so I can be sure that I am not missing anybody's question. Hey, Aaron, good to see you. I assume that you can hear me. Throw me a little thumbs up if you can, would you please? Uh-oh, that's not a good thing. Hopefully you can hear me. Okay, so you can hear me okay. Perfect. Thank you. I appreciate it. Okie doke. So we have had a number of questions that have come in from our newsletter request for questions. And so I'm going to go through just a couple of them that I can answer pretty quickly with short answers. Most of the answers are, yes, we do. One of the questions that keeps coming up is, I don't live in Houston. Can I still work with you? Well, the answer is, I don't live in Houston, and yes, you can. We actually specialize in phone consults. When we started working with autism, we started doing phone consults because people wanted our help, and we are perfectly capable of shipping out remedies around the country and into most countries around the world. So we actually right now have clients in, about 6 or 7 different countries at the moment, as well as in most of the states of the United States. We do a phone consult. We determine what your child needs each month when we do sequential. Or if you want our relief and support program, then you just contact us and we ship it out about every couple of months as you need the refills. So we have kids literally all over the country and all over the world who have recovered that we've never even met, and a lot more that have had other improvements, not necessarily fully recovered. So the answer is, no, you don't have to come to Houston. No, you don't have to try to find another office. You don't have to come in person. We specialize in phone consults. And frankly, once our clients in Houston decided that it was more convenient to just call us on the phone instead of fighting Houston traffic, we actually all have fulfilled our dreams of leaving the big city of Houston for most of our time. So no, you don't have to come to Houston. And yes, we do consults by phone. We do it day in, day out, lots and lots of practice over about the last 12 or 13 years. Okay, can we help with Lyme disease? And excuse me, can we help specifically with Lyme disease and autism? The answer is absolutely we can. We have worked with Lyme disease in adults who are not autistic. We've worked with teenagers with Lyme who are not autistic, and we have worked with probably more kids than we even know, since we do not depend on a diagnosis. We have worked with many, many kids who probably do, and some who definitely do have a co-diagnosis of Lyme disease. So very definitely we can work with Lyme, and we've had really good luck with it. It does go a little bit slower when a child with autism has Lyme as well, because Lyme is such a burden on the immune system. It's not like we can just get rid of it overnight. We work with it alongside the various problems that are creating the autism behaviors. Okay, and one final one. Can we help with pandas or pans or cans? Yes, we can. We can work with kids who have a co-diagnosis of autism and pandas or pans or cans. And we work with children who have a diagnosis, and we're even seeing adults with anxiety disorders that quite frequently are actually related to streptococcus. So the answer is yes, we work with everything. We don't have to have diagnoses. We go by the symptoms. That is how homeopathy works. We go by not just generalized symptoms of Lyme or pandas. We go by how the symptoms specifically manifest, what makes them better or worse in that particular individual. And individualized medicine, mark my words, in some point future, it will become obvious that going back to individualized medicine and, you know, the old country doctor who knew all about you and your family and their history, it is the wave of the future. Because if you cannot address things individualized, then you're never going to get true healing. Everybody is an individual, and how they respond to various illnesses, pathogens, toxins is going to vary. And that is what homeopathy has known and has acted from for well over 200 years. And we are no different. In fact, we pride ourselves in highly, highly individualizing our sequential homeopathy program. So no matter what your problem is, whether it's arthritis, hangnails, candida, allergies, or autism, or IBS, or, you know, neurological problems, it doesn't matter. What matters is that we can get a good overview and description of the symptoms, what makes them better or worse, and how they affect you personally. And from there, we choose the correct remedy or remedies that will bring about improvements. Okay, so let's jump into our topic of the day, which is tantrums. Most kids are going to throw tantrums. It is a part of childhood, and I dare say I have thrown my share of tantrums as an adult. I'm working on it. God is still not done with me, and there's a lot of improvement to be had. But the tantrums that we find in autism, developmental delays of all sorts, and even in basically neurotypical kids, but it just seems like they're more irritable. You kind of walk on eggshells. Quite frequently, it is related to vaccines. We're not talking about typical childhood, you know, my mommy told me no, so I'm going to throw a tantrum in the grocery store because I can't have the candy. We're not talking about that, all that, though that can certainly be a trigger. We're talking about very much specific types of tantrums where the child truly loses control and cannot control their behavior. They can't get a handle on themselves. And that happens very frequently with autism. And there are actually some specific behaviors that may be associated with various types of tantrums in autism that give us clues as to what's physiologically going on. And then we're able to have remedies in your hands as we're working with your child, so that when it does happen, you can immediately give them some relief of the physiological problem that may be behind it. Or if it's more of a long-term thing, of course, we're going to be chiseling away at it to try to get back to the causational factors to eliminate it. But sometimes it's just the symptoms rise up and the child is in pain, and you need to know what part is hurting in order to get them the relief. So I'm just going to go through some specific behaviors that we often see with kids who have tantrums. When we have kids who bite their wrists or their hands, they, when they're biting their wrists and hands, almost without exception, we find that those are the kids who have reflux or GERD, whatever you want to call it. It's severe heartburn. Whatever you want to call it, it is heartburn. And one of those indications is this wrist biting in autism. And if you think about, in some of the old war movies, and, some poor guy has had a bullet, hit him on the battlefield, and they don't have anesthesia, so they pour a little whiskey in his mouth, but they put a piece of wood with cloth wrapped around it in his mouth so he can bite on it. That's really what they're doing. The kids, they don't have a piece of wood with cloth, so they do the next best thing. They bite themselves. They bite whatever is handy. And secondarily, I honestly think sometimes that creating a secondary, more focused pain here or here is perhaps one of the ways that they can get their mind off the belly fire. So when we see that, there are remedies that we can definitely use for it. There are remedies that you can buy over the counter that you can certainly try if you suspect this. A couple of them that we use are going to be aloe. It is made from aloe vera. Or alternatively, if you don't want to try the homeopathic should be in a fairly low potency, like a 6C or a 6X, 30X, something like that, to try to give them relief. Or you can also try using aloe vera juice, and you can mix it with other juices because it's kind of slimy. So, put it with something that maybe is relatively low acid, like an organic grape juice or something that doesn't have a lot of citric acid added to it as a preservative, because you don't want to increase the volume of acid in the stomach. Now, just real quickly, and from the long-term standpoint, reflux is usually a sign that something has impacted the liver upstream of the stomach. So if the liver is impacted, quite frequently we focus on liver supports before we try to focus on the reflux per se. Usually what we're doing when we're working with somebody with sequential is we will focus on both symptom remedies for the reflux, and we do a combination for that is appropriate to that child, and then we combine it frequently with the focus on liver remedies. So that's something that, whatever you're working with, whether it be homeopathy or some other approach, maybe essential oils, you want to focus on both liver as well as the reflux. But reflux pain will cause kids to have these explosive meltdowns, and they will, you kind of don't see it coming, but quite frequently it also happens shortly after they've eaten. Because what happens is they put in the food, and if the liver and the small intestine are not functioning well, then what happens is they're not actually releasing a strong enough stomach acid. And so the body compensates because it's not strong enough to break down, especially meat proteins. They're hard to break down. They primarily do their first breakdown in the stomach with the gastric acid. So if the gastric acid is not strong enough to break it down, the body tries to compensate by putting more volume of that acid in there, which really doesn't help break it down any better. And then what you get is this backup into the lower part of the esophagus. And the esophagus is not built for stomach acid. There is a valve in between the stomach and the esophagus that opens when we eat and lets the food in. And unfortunately, when you get too much acid, it backs up. So that's one reason that the The proton pump inhibitors usually make it worse in the long run because they're aimed at causing less acid to be produced, but that's not, it's the volume of acid is the problem that hurts the esophagus, but it doesn't fix the problem that the liver and the pancreas and the upper intestine, the small intestine, are not working well together to be able to make that acid strong enough to do the breakdown. So you don't really want to make less acid per se, you just need to make enough of the strong enough acid. So that's kind of overkill on reflux and why that has to do with explosive tantrums. But that, again, if the tantrums happen after a meal and in association with wrist or hand biting, if your child does bite their hands or wrists, then that is a sign of reflux, and that needs to be addressed one way or another. And we definitely address that with our kids with autism. And that's something, if you work with us, you want to put that on your intake paperwork, that my child bites his hands and his arms, tends to have explosive, sudden, out of nowhere tantrums. Often it's after eating. Okay, so another demonstration of problems is head banging. If your child goes into a rage and they hit their head against the wall, or they take a book and they hit themselves, or they hit themselves on a desk or on a table, or sometimes they just lay down on the floor and they bang their head on the floor. I mean, so many of the kids who are head bangers are having to wear helmets, and the medical world has not figured out that head banging means their lower intestines are hurting. They're on fire, they're inflamed, and they have severe gut pain. I think a lot of kids who literally are creating their own head injuries, that behavior would stop with attention and focus on the gut. So one of the things that you can do without us, without ever talking to us, just a little tip here, get your kids off of gluten 100% and get them off of casein 100%. There are a million lists out there on the internet, lots of resources on the things, which grains have gluten. Gluten is the protein that is a part of many grains, wheat being the one that most people think of first, but other grains also have gluten. So become gluten literate and avoid those, and try to avoid them 100%, because they will stay in the system for about 3 to 4 days before they completely go from this end to the other end and clear out of the system. And along the way, they are very highly inflammatory to the gut in kids with autism or on the autism spectrum, because, again, they're not breaking them down efficiently in the stomach. And then when they get into the intestines, which are already inflamed by things like the measles virus or maybe rotavirus from vaccines, or from wild forms, these kids can't metabolize those. So they've also got an inflammatory gut. They may have some leaky gut. So the ongoing breakdown in the gut isn't happening. And the presence of gluten or casein, which is present in the whey part of milk, both of those things are going to further inflame the gut. Dysbiosis will also inflame the gut. So sometimes just adding a good probiotic will help them. I would suggest commercial yogurts and commercially produced kefir are, even though there's a lot of hype about, oh, they contain wonderful probiotics. Well, no, they really don't. They have been pasteurized. So it does two things that are going to be problematic for our kids with autism. Number one, it contains casein. They are milk products, unless you get the coconut milk variety. But the milk variety yogurts and kefirs are going to contain whey. The whey contains the casein, and that is going to inflame the gut. And again, it takes 3 or 4 days for, you know, even a tablespoon or so of yogurt to completely clear the system and for the inflammation to start ratcheting back down. But if they get it again the next day, now you've extended that. So that's one reason we say if you're going to try gluten-free, casein-free, or GFCF diets, you need to give yourself a minimum of 2 weeks where you are 100% casein and gluten-free. Because if you don't, every time there's an infraction, you've added 3 days when you're not really seeing what it can do for your child's behavior. And you're not really going to see it for the first week or two anyway, because yes, you get the casein and gluten out of the system, but then you also need some time. If that is behind your child's inflammation, and I would say almost across the board, it probably is in most cases. If I do not drink milk, I can use cream, I can use butter, I can take aged cheeses, because the aging process of cheeses, if they are aged more than, I believe, about 60 days, any aged cheese that's aged 60 to 90 days, to be sure, don't take my word for it, look that up. But most of the time, aged cheeses, the kids can handle a little bit here and there, because the enzymes that are created in the fermentation and aging process will break down the casein for them. But if you're trying to go GFCF, go strictly milk-free, dairy-free, don't even do aged cheeses, give your kids' guts time enough to clear it out of the system, clear out the gluten, clear out the casein, give them absolutely none, not even so much as one of those little fish-shaped cheese crackers that I won't say the name of, but that are used a lot as ABA rewards. Don't let the teachers and the therapists give your child a fun little snack, because it's going to ramp it back up. Another aspect of yogurt and kefir, as well as some probiotics that you need to pay attention to that can also kick off tantrums, is going to be a strain of probiotic. It's considered to be a healthy probiotic strain. It's called Streptococcus thermophilus. It's often abbreviated as Strep Therm or S Therm or S Thermophilus. It is in every commercial yogurt and every commercial kefir, even the coconut milk-based ones. And if you have a child who has pandas, or even if your child has a history of strep, that can be a real big problem for them, because the Streptococcus thermophilus is going to greatly increase the inflammation in the gut. And we have found that our kids who are pandas kids, or pans or cans, whatever you want to call it, and even some of our moms who developed an anxiety problem after an exposure to strep, if they eat yogurt, it actually makes it really, really hard for us to get a handle on the anxiety or the OCD or whatever the particular pandas, the tics. In some cases, pandas can create tics. And so, yes, there is a neurological piece in that case, but there's very much an inflammatory piece, which is affecting the nerves, and it is going into the nervous system for whatever reason. And the Strep thermophilus from yogurt, kefir, or some probiotics are going to be problematic. A word about probiotics and the Strep Therm. Not all probiotics have them. We actually have what we call our probiotic duo that we have had made up for us. It is labeled as an HCH. There are two that we sell as a package together that are HCH probiotic duo that you can call us about, and we can sell those to you if you're interested. And we have vetted them that they do not contain any Strep thermophilus, and they are also professional strength. So you're not going to be able to just pick up something of this quality and strength on the market, you know, out out in a health food store or something like that. We keep them refrigerated. But the biggest issue is we do not want any strep therm going in our clients, because so many of them are very, very high in strep. So that brings me to one more issue. If your child has a history of ear infections or throat infections, or super fast onset high fevers that kind of come out of nowhere and then they go away almost out of nowhere, that is a sign that probably your child has got a history of streptococcus. It can come from the PCV vaccines, which are Streptococcus pneumoniae in 13 strains now, but they also shed. So if somebody my age, they're pushing the pneumonia vaccines, and it's actually a Streptococcus pneumoniae combination. So if they walk into your neighborhood grocery store and they have a drugstore attached and they get their pneumonia shot, and then they're shopping and they sneeze and it gets on their cart, and you go in and you grab that cart and you have it on your hands, then you're, patting little Johnny's face, or he's sitting in the cart and, gumming the handle, then that's going to be a strep exposure. And quite frequently, kids get sick after that, and moms don't know where it's coming from. Vaccines shed through sneezing and coughing and, nose blowing and all that kind of thing, sneezing on the grocery cart. And so if you have that kind of history and you have pandas, or your child has a history of strep and pandas, or if they've been given a PCV vaccine, then we would look at that certainly as a possibility, especially when a child gets hold of something that has an excitotoxin in their diet. What are excitotoxins? They are things that break down in the system to glutamate or glutamic acid. So anything that has MSG, which is monosodium glutamate, as part of its ingredients, which is, I dare say, probably 90% of what you buy off the shelf in a grocery store. It's part of the flavor enhancement. It can be listed under spices. It's not listed. It is actually allowed to be called spices. So if you buy something that is not organic and one of the ingredients is spices, or it could be artificial flavors or artificial colors or flavor enhancers on the label, it may be MSG. But artificial colors, artificial flavors, certain preservatives such as BHA and BHT that are used in packaging, like for commercial cereals, cake mixes, that kind of thing, all of those things are actually going to be seen as excitotoxins. And Dr. Russell Blaylock, Blaylock, is a, oh dear, I better not say what his specialty is. He'll get wind of this and go, that's not my specialty. I think he is a neurologist, but don't quote me. Anyway, he is a medical doctor. I believe he's semi-retired, and he wrote an entire paper, pretty thick paper, that was published in Alternative Therapies magazine about excitotoxins and autism. The takeaway point from that is twofold, 2 points. One, your child nobody needs excitotoxins, because they act to fire the neurons in the brain, and they go overboard and actually will then kill nerve cells in the brain. So excitotoxins, he has a book out called Excitotoxins, the Taste That Kills, which he wrote, wow, probably 20 years ago. It was one of the first things on my bookshelf when I was studying homeopathy, so over 20 years ago. And then he also published a study about 5 or 6 years ago in Alternative Therapies that brought it into autism and developmental delays specifically. And a lot of good information there. You can actually Google Russell Blaylock excitotoxins autism, and you'll probably find it. It was long enough. It was actually published in 3 consecutive volumes of Alternative Therapies magazine. And the other thing is excitotoxins are everywhere and can cause severe tantruming. We have had kids whose autism entirely went away. They looked very neurotypical, except they had horrific tantrums. And usually they would get it sometime like after lunch or after a therapy session, where one of the goodies that was used as one of their rewards during ABA or something would be one of those little fish-shaped crackers or a little square cheese cracker, which is rife with MSG, artificial flavors, and artificial colors, and the kids would start getting more angry through their ABA sessions. Every time they got one of these, they were kicking off the excitotoxin reaction in their brains, and then by the end of the session, they were doing way worse. So if you've got a child that's going to some kind of therapy and the therapist says, you know, we get off to a really good start, but by the end he's getting frustrated and he's tired, and maybe he's not frustrated and tired, find out what they're using as the reward. If it's, you know, maybe a jelly bean that has a lot of artificial colors and artificial flavors, if it is a, you know, like I said, one of those little cheese flavored crackers, you might want to look into getting something that is 100% natural and organic. Not just natural. Natural doesn't mean anything anymore in food labeling. It needs to be organic to really get that out of there. So look to the diet. If your child headbangs, you want to look to maybe doing gluten-free, casein-free, and maybe limiting the amount of meat that they get. Small meals frequently is actually better for all of us. It tends to be better if you're trying to watch your weight. If you're my age, you know, postmenopausal, and oh gee, my weight's creeping up on me. I've found that when I started basically grazing on healthy snacks through the day, I actually started losing weight and then maintaining it very, very nicely. But that also is going to help the gut function better, because it really, 3 squares a day is sort of a 20th century, you know, late 19th, 20th century, and now 21st century thing, because we've all gone to 5-day a week, 40-hour work days, and meals are more or less catch as canned. So it's morning, midday, and evening, when actually grazing is what humans were built for. We are omnivores, we are hunter-gatherers, and you know, when you were hunting and gathering in the wild, you didn't find 3 square meals a day. You hunted and gathered all day long, and then you might have you know, one fairly large meal, but then everything else might be smaller because you didn't find it all at once. And that's really a very healthy way to eat. And that is going to relieve some gut inflammation. But also consider the gluten-free, casein-free, but again, give it an absolute minimum of 2 weeks, completely 100%, not one infraction, not even one of those little crackers, because it's not going to give you a good idea of whether it helped. We've had a lot of parents say, oh, we did gluten-free, casein-free, and you know, we tried it for a couple of weeks here and there, and it just never did anything. Well, in a couple of weeks, it's not going to. You have to give it time to clear the system, and then you have to give the system time to reduce the inflammation. But it will help your child if they're a headbanger. And again, reflux, even there, the small meals are going to help with reflux, because if there's just a little bit at a time in the stomach, then there may be enough acid that the stomach doesn't produce major amounts of it. You want to keep food in the stomach so it's never completely empty, but you don't want large amounts going in at once. All right, well, I am going to, let's see if we've got, it looks like we don't have any questions right now coming up from this, but if you do have questions and you watch this later, This will be posted on our website. I'm sorry, on our Facebook page. It takes a few minutes for it to go through Facebook's machinations to get it posted, but it will be here. You can look at it at your leisure. And if you do find yourself having questions, you can either post them at the end of this. You're welcome to post them, and we will check them and get back to you. Or you can, if it's a little longer question, you can email newsletter@homeopathyhouston.com, and I'm going to actually put that in the comments. And we will try to answer those on our upcoming various Facebook Lives. And also, if you watch this in time, we're going to be doing another Facebook Live in about 25 minutes. And that one is going to be on allergies, not just for autism, allergies and anybody who has seasonal allergies. It is about airborne allergies. It is not about food allergies. Those are typically related to leaky gut. That's a whole other Facebook Live that'll be upcoming. But in about 25 minutes, so at 2:30 Central Time today, I'm going to be talking about allergies. And if you want information on sequential homeopathy, if you look in my comments, you'll find links to that. And if you like our non-individualized approach as a means to try to help your child's gut, it's very gut focused. We have our Autism Relief and Support Program, and I have a link to that. Thank you for your time. Take care.